I am sick and tired of this propaganda that Jason Scott was one of the best Red Rangers of all time. He may have been first, but he was a scaredy cat. Any chance that he got, he ran away from his problems. Okay, took him like, what, a season and a half to go off to some peace conference when the world was literally being invaded by aliens. Pretty sure that takes precedent over whatever the hell he was doing over in Switzerland. But okay, I understand, he probably learned the error of his ways. He came back in Power Rangers. Zeo realized that he was the man for the job and that he could protect Earth, and that was, more worthy of his time. Until Zeo ended and he just fucking disappeared again. He literally just waltzes off like nothing even happened in Power Rangers Zeo. He probably just went to go scuba dive more with Kimberly. I can't say that I blame him, but it's proving my point. And to top it all off, in Forever Red, when Serpentera is about to be, re-energized or rebirthed or whatever the hell, he's the last one to show up. He's fashionably late to the end of the world. Even Tommy was like, I'm not even sure if this dude is gonna show up, and was surprised when he did. And even though I am completely exaggerating all of this, and I actually love Jason, it does prove the point that not every Ranger is cut out for the job. Sometimes either a mentor makes a mistake, or they just get in way over their heads, or hell, it's just not in the cards for them. They have other things they want to do with their life. There were plenty of Rangers throughout the series that straight up gave up their powers. Jason did it many times, and that's why I started with him. He was, in and out like that. In fact, another Ranger actually had to give up their powers for Jason to come in and have his. When it came to the Gold Ranger powers, he got it from a power transfer with Tray of Triforia. But most of the time when there is a power transfer from one Ranger to another, it's usually deserved. Power Rangers SPD spent 38 episodes building up to a power transfer. It's kind of weird because most of the time that this happens, it's to open up a new chapter of the show, to hit a refresh and then start giving you stories with this new Ranger, this person who previously didn't have these powers. But Power Rangers SPD ended the show on those terms because Sky Tate, the Blue Ranger, the second in command in B Squad, always wanted to be number one. He always wanted to be the Red Ranger, just like his father was. He always looked up to his father. His father was his hero, and it makes sense because we learned from Doggy Kruger that Sky's dad was one of the best, one of the greatest Rangers to ever walk into SPD. So when Sky was finally given a morpher and he turned out to be the Blue Ranger, it was quite a bit of a disappointment, especially when he learned that the person who ended up becoming the Red Ranger of his team was just some guy that Kruger found out on the street. Not only that, but he was a criminal. Jack was a criminal, a street thief that Sky helped apprehend and then becomes his boss. That is crazy. I mean, we learn later on that Jack's parents, or one of his parents, was at SPD, and that there was a reason that they were all brought together and they're more interlinked than they thought. But at the same time, it was quite the shock to Sky, and kind of a slap in the face to all of his years of hard work at the academy, trying to become the Red Ranger. And we, the audience, feel that disappointment a lot throughout the show. We get a lot of episodes focused on Sky and Jack. The back and forth, Sky not necessarily respecting Jack as a leader, kind of just being salty that he wasn't given that position, although for a while there, Jack was genuinely a horrible leader. But still, we got Jack trying to prove himself as a leader, and it was really frustrating for him as well because he didn't even want to be there in the first place. Once he was apprehended from SPD, Kruger, the head commander of SPD Earth, gave him an ultimatum. Either you become our Red Ranger for B Squad, or you stay in jail. Any sane person is going to decide to become a Power Ranger. That's what Jack chose. He was given all of this responsibility that he didn't want, and he was like constantly being ridiculed by his number two. It wasn't easy for Jack either. So you got a different side of the same coin. We got two Rangers on the same team. One who desperately wants to be a Ranger. It is his calling, and more than that, he wanted to be the Red Ranger, the position he didn't get. And then you have Jack, the guy who honestly didn't even really want to be there. Of course, throughout the show, we tried to get better, and he wanted to do a good job at his job, but at the end of the day, it wasn't his calling. So it was very satisfying at the end of the show, after the bad guy was defeated, that Jack decided he had had enough. So he left. He started doing charity work, sort of like what he was doing already, like giving out food and clothes to those in need, this time just in a legal way. And in his absence, we needed a Red Ranger, and Sky filled that role. Throughout the entire show, over multiple episodes, we saw Sky become a better person and a better leader. Kruger knew what he was doing choosing Jack to be the Red Ranger. He knew it would get under Sky's skin. He knew that it would, take his ego down a notch and make him learn to work well with others. We saw at the beginning of the show, he was constantly fighting with his other teammates, and he would have made a horrible leader because not only did he not understand his teammates, but he also didn't respect them. By putting somebody in charge that he hated and ended up having to, follow the command of, it made him more of an understanding and thoughtful person who will work together with his team instead of just shouting out commands. And so Doggy Kruger decided to make him the Red Ranger after all of that learning and character development after Jack left. It was the perfect moment, and in my opinion, the perfect power transfer in all of Power Rangers history, because not only did Jack deserve to leave, Sky deserved the powers that he got. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. The entire show had been building to this moment. And then off-screen, 2 years later, Bridge becomes the Red Ranger. That's a whole other thing. I'm not saying he isn't deserving of that position, but it was just strange, because I really wish we got to see Sky as Red Ranger in that team up. The entire show built up to it, and then we just never really got to see him be the Red Ranger much. For those of you that haven't seen Time Force or need a quick refresher, Alex was the Red Time Force Ranger from the year 3000. He was struck down by Ransik, the main villain of the series, in episode 1. He was presumed dead, and then the rest of his team went back in time to capture Ransik. It was in that time that they chose a new Red Ranger, a new leader, although you could argue that Jen was the leader for the cause. Wes became the Red Ranger of Time Force in the year 2001 and carried on Alex's duties. Then later on in the show, about halfway through, we learned that Alex actually survived his injuries. He went back in time because the course of history was shifting so much that he felt like he needed to take back the role as Red Ranger. He felt that Wes wasn't doing a good enough job and that the timeline was in too much danger of becoming very and wildly different. He then, for an episode of 2, assumed the role of Red Ranger and fired Wes from the cause. He was taking back the powers that arguably were rightfully his, but at the same time, things weren't working out as planned. He ended up being a worse leader than Wes. Even though he was the original Red Ranger power holder, he presumably had the powers for longer, he just didn't work well with the rest of the Time Force Rangers. His thought process and the way of doing things when it came to being a Power Ranger were wildly different from the rest of the team. They kind of didn't even like Alex at a certain point and wanted Wes back as the Red Ranger. And Alex, because he's a good enough Red Ranger and he could see the writing on the wall, decided to give up his powers kind of for a second time to Wes. He ultimately realized that he wasn't right for the team. I don't know if he necessarily thought himself that he was a bad leader, but he noticed that Wes was doing a better job than even he could. And he had more experience and was from the future. But because he was a good officer and more than anything just wanted Ransik to be apprehended and for his fiancée or ex-fiancée Jen to be happy, he gave Wes back the Red Ranger Morpher. But did he want to do this? Not necessarily. I'm pretty sure that he wanted to continue to be the Red Ranger. He wanted to be a good leader and he wanted to do good in the past. That was the only reason that he was there, was to complete that mission, but knew that he probably didn't have the chops for it, or at least he couldn't bring the team together to do it. So he reluctantly, I feel like I've said this a few times now, gave Wes the Red Ranger Morpher back, and Wes ended up helping apprehend Ransik. This was a great moment, not necessarily for Alex. It was actually a disappointing moment for him, but it was a great moment for Wes. You know, you could argue that a certain character or a certain Red Ranger is the perfect leader for the team in any Power Rangers series. There's plenty of great Red Rangers. You could argue that Carter Grayson or Tyler from Dino Charge, what is his last name? Tyler, I feel like I should know this. It's Navarro. Idiot. That you could argue that Tyler is the only person on the team who could lead the Dino Charge Rangers. But at the end of the day, will you ever really know that? Not necessarily, because we only ever see him be the Red Ranger. We only ever see him lead the team. Time Force gave us a really good opportunity to see what the team would be like without Wes. They didn't just say that Wes was a great leader and a great Red Ranger. They showed us by replacing him with a Red Ranger that wasn't as good. Alex giving up his powers in this power transfer is once again one of the best I think we have ever seen, because it just shows us what it would be like without our current Red Ranger. It gives him more value and it makes you like him even more, especially considering Alex is supposed to be this great leader and this great Red Ranger, and he had all these accomplishments in the future only for Wes to completely outclass him. It just gives you a new insight into how great Wes is and gives you more appreciation for him as a Red Ranger. But it also wasn't the end for Alex. He continued to help the Rangers from the year 3000, sending back Zords and assisting them with many different things. Just because he wasn't the Red Ranger doesn't mean that he was useless. And this is the exact same thing that happened with Billy. He wasn't forced to not be a Power Ranger anymore, but he decided to give powers to somebody else. After the Mighty Morphin powers were destroyed and the Zeo powers came into play, there was a noticeable problem. The fact that there were only 5 Zeo subcrystals, but there were 6 people, or 6 former Rangers. Billy was an experienced and great Power Ranger, but decided to give up his Zeo subcrystal to Tanya so that she could become a Ranger. And Billy knew his worth. He realized that he didn't have to have superpowers to be useful to the team. He was the smartest Ranger out of all of them, and he could really help out behind the scenes, have more of an alpha role, create technology for the Rangers, help them with battle strategies, and assist Zordon and Alpha while everybody else is out fighting the Machine Empire. And I think this was a really smart move by Saban Entertainment, a little behind the scenes thing, where they had 6 former Rangers, but moving into Power Rangers Zeo, they only had 5 Zeo Rangers for the first 20 episodes or so of footage that they could use. But like I said earlier, is the smartest out of everybody and could arguably be more useful behind the scenes. We have a lot of great martial artists, a lot of great fighters already on the battlefield. Maybe they could honestly defeat the threat quicker if Billy wasn't even a Ranger, if he was the strategist of the team. So when he gave up his powers and gave it to somebody else, it felt like it made sense, like it was earned, like he could finally take a back seat but still be very useful. And I really like that. But those are all competent Rangers who just made the decision to give up their powers. What about somebody who probably would not have just made a good Power Ranger? Somebody who gave up their powers because they had a feeling that they wouldn't be as useful as everybody else on the team. I think Albert Smith is a good example of that. The purple Dino Charge Ranger from one episode, world famous in New Zealand. He bonded to the purple Energem after saving a girl, I believe, on a mountain climbing trip. Yeah, he had a moment of heroism that the Energem saw and allowed access to its powers. From there, he took the Energem home to New Zealand and used the purple Dino Charge Ranger powers to be like a friendly neighborhood Power Ranger, something that we never get to see, which I thought was really cool, where he was just like the local protector. He stopped bike thieves and just local bad guys instead of a galactic threat like an alien invasion. But eventually, the other Dino Charge Rangers found out about this guy and the fact that he had the Purple Ranger powers and wanted him to join the team. It was just the natural next step. especially because they knew that Sledge was going to be after the Energem. They all really need to band together to protect each other and to destroy Sledge. Like I said, it just makes sense. But he was only a local hero because that was what he was capable of. Albert Smith was kind of an old man. He was in his, late 60s, maybe even early 70s, and he was kind of a scaredy cat once again. So he wasn't necessarily up to the task. He was great at what he was doing locally. He was a great local hero, but if you're fighting a galactic threat, you're fighting aliens and fighting these monsters that are way more powerful than a bike thief, it makes sense to allow somebody else to have the opportunity to use those powers. Now, they didn't know who that was going to be at the time, but Albert and Keeper came to the decision that they were going to unbond Albert from the Purple Energem, and from there, it could find a new host later on. That ended up being Kendall, and that was a good choice as well, but you can tell that Albert knew that he should give up the powers so that somebody else can use them better, but he was disappointed that he couldn't keep being that local hero, and he would have been really great at that local hero role. And finally, there's the case of just retirement. You know, the threat is gone. Evil was destroyed. Like, there's no real reason to continue using these powers. You kind of give them up, but keep them for a rainy day. That happens in Power Rangers as well. Most famously in Power Rangers RPM, after Venjix was destroyed, they give up their powers. They give their morphers to Dr. K, the leader of the team, and the mentor, and she locks the morphers away. It just makes sense. Why have that technology out there that is technically kind of dangerous and for no reason, The threat is gone. But then when a new threat arises, you can use the powers later. Just look at General Cog. He came back in the Clash of the Red Rangers movie with Power Rangers Samurai, and Scott was able to just, grab his morpher, get the powers back, and get moving. That happens as well. But those are my favorite examples of Power Rangers giving up their powers. This was the rambliest video that I ever made, and I'm really sorry if it's way too long for you, but I'm just, kind of ranting here about stuff that I really enjoy in the show. As you can tell, I moved. This is my new setup. Honestly, I don't like it as much as the other one, and the sunlight never pierced through my window, so I had to buy these two lights here, unfortunately. So this setup is a little scuffed, but hopefully it'll... See, I can't even get this stand back. Whatever. Hopefully it'll work out. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch y'all in next video. Peace.